A little while ago, I made a video not about some shiny new press car, but about my own car. This car, in fact, is a 2004 Audi A2. Do you know, I love this thing. I love how forward-thinking it was and how, in its design and construction, it's almost more like a supercar than a super mini. In fact, I always said to myself that if Audi built a new A2, then I would buy one. Sadly, though, Audi didn't. BMW did, though, and now I'm a hell of a lot poorer. That's right, I have bought an i3. And in doing so, I've joined the world of electric motoring. Now in this CarGurus UK video, we're going to explore why I've bought an i3 and look at some of the car's pros and cons. But before we begin, here is your reminder to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you'll know when our new videos go live. So why did I buy an i3? Well, I think it's, as I said, it's that spiritual connection almost that it has with the A2. For me, as someone who can't afford to buy or run a high-end sports car or supercar, the idea that you can have a small car with similar kinds of technology is just fantastic. Specifically, where the i3 differs from other small cars is in its use of a central carbon fibre reinforced plastic passenger cell. This is essentially glued to an aluminium rolling chassis that houses the battery and has the drivetrain, suspension and steering mounted to it. The body panels, meanwhile, are made from a polymer plastic. So why go to all this trouble to save weight? That's the answer. BMW, you see, knew that its electric car would need a heavy battery, but it still wanted it to perform like a BMW should, and that meant saving as much weight elsewhere in the car as it could. So all told, the i3 weighs about 1,250 kilograms, which by modern car standards isn't bad at all. When you factor in that the battery alone weighs more than 200 kilograms, the overall curb weight is actually pretty remarkable. Being light helps not only the range, but also the performance, which brings us to another part of what makes the i3 so appealing. It's genuinely great to drive as well. So the electric motor produces 170 horsepower, and in a small car, that is enough to give pretty decent performance. In fact, from 0 to around 40 miles per hour, it is shockingly quick, really. And even beyond that, up to motorway speeds, it's got pretty strong performance. As for range, this is a late 2015 car, so it's got the 22 kilowatt hour battery. So on a full charge, that's good for about 60 to 70 miles. It's winter at the moment. I expect that to improve a bit in the summertime when it's a bit warmer. So, I mean, obviously that's not loads, but bearing in mind how I use the car, which is mainly for short urban journeys, it's fine. It's completely fit for purpose. Having said that, I did go for a car with the range extender, so it's got a 650cc two-cylinder petrol engine in the back that acts as a generator. The idea is that when the battery power runs low, the petrol engine can kick in to maintain the state of charge. In Europe, you can also switch on the range extender manually to hold the battery power for later in your journey. In years to come, it's quite possible that the idea of having an electric car with its own onboard petrol generator will just seem a bit bizarre. But in the here and now and in the i3, I think it's actually quite an elegant solution to range anxiety. Take a journey I did the other day, for example. It was 170 odd miles and I set off with a full battery charge and a full tank of petrol in the range extender. And I got home with stopping just once to fill up the petrol tank. It was about £10. Now, I haven't worked out the maths of that. I don't know what the actual miles per gallon figure was. It was probably, I don't know, 30 to 40 miles per gallon. But to me, that didn't matter. What mattered was that I was able to take my electric car on a long journey with the minimum of inconvenience. Right, I'll do more in the way of driving impressions in a future video, because what I want to do now is talk about the i3 in general for anybody else who is thinking about buying a used one, and some of the things that were important to me when looking at used ones. So for example, this screen, this has the larger professional nav screen. Now this has extra features over the standard smaller screen that you get, but to be honest, it was the aesthetics I like. This is a really futuristic interior and I think the big screen just sets it off nicely. I've also got a sunroof. That's not essential, but it does just allow a bit more light into the cabin, which I really like. But the main thing I think you should be aware of when looking at i3s is under this filler flap here. So this is where you charge the car. So all i3s get this Type 2 connector, but optionally you could have rapid charge preparation. That's this extra bit down here. This allows you to plug into a rapid charger and give the battery an 80% boost in around 25 minutes. And for me, I just felt like this really helped to future-proof this particular i3. So if I use a rapid charger and then also top up with petrol at the same pit stop, that buys me comfortably more than 100 miles. As I say, I don't particularly plan to use the i3 in that way, but it's useful to know that I can if I need to. In fact, for 99.9% of the time, I just charge the car at home. I've got a 7 kilowatt wall box and it takes around 3 to 4 hours to charge the battery. Now, I'm far from an EV evangelist, but I have to say the convenience of home charging has been a revelation, as has been the ability to pre-warm the car, either via a button on the key or via the BMW connected app. No more scraping ice off windscreens for me in the morning. It's not just preheating that the app is useful for either. I've also used it several times to unlock and lock the car when I haven't had the key on me but have needed to get something out. Now, so far we've spent a lot of time talking about things that are really good about the i3. What about the things that are perhaps not so good? Well, what about this boot, for example? This is not a huge boot. It's smaller than the boot in the Audi A2, for example. And actually, practicality overall is not as good as the Audi. You can't, for example, remove the rear seats, which you can in an A2, although I appreciate that it is fairly unique in that regard. In the i3, you also get these rear hinged back doors. Now, to begin with, you might think these are ingenious because by getting rid of the central pillar, the B pillar, it makes access to the back seats really easy. However, what you soon learn is that the doors do actually present quite a few compromises. For example, you need a fair amount of space to get them open. So if you're in a tight supermarket car park space, it's not ideal. The back windows also don't open. And to open the back door, you first have to open the front door. So actually, I would say in terms of compromises with an i3, that's probably the biggest one for me. But then every great car needs its flaws, doesn't it? Now, one flaw I could do without, though, is what some i3 owners report is a propensity for getting punctures in these narrow tyres, more so than an average car anyway. And having already picked up a puncture in what was a brand new tyre after just 2 weeks of owning the car, I have to say that early signs aren't too promising. Speaking of tyres, I have put the i3 on a set of Continental winter boots and will report back in a later video about how these perform. Right, one more gripe and then I am done. It doesn't concern the front boot itself, which is actually really useful, particularly, incidentally, if you buy one of these BMW storage bags that keeps everything dry. No, my gripe is that when you buy an approved used i3, which this one is, it only comes with the standard 3-pin charger. To get this Type 2 to Type 2 lead, which is what you need to plug into a wall box if it's not tethered, is another £140 or so, which to me just seems a bit tight. It's a bit like, oh, I don't know, going to an all-you-can-eat buffet and then being given a teaspoon to eat it with. Do these things spoil the i3 for me? No, they don't. Aside from being really good to drive, great to sit in and packed with interesting features, the i3 really fulfills what I wanted from a car in that it's incredibly interesting without being horrendously expensive to buy and run. It really is, I think, like an Audi A2 built for the electric age. Now, if you're thinking about buying and running an i3, it's worth subscribing to this channel because I'll be doing occasional updates on what life with the i3 is like. And if you want to search for your own used i3, then I highly recommend going to cargurus.co.uk, which is where you can easily find great deals from top-rated dealers. And you can take that from somebody who did precisely that. Right, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.